I love that. I love that music.
Okay.
Love it.
Everyone gets walk-on music. It's always tough to be on stage with someone who's on TV every day because they're much better in front of the camera, in front of crowds. But you're an anchor at Bloomberg. Explain your show. You've just moved off the morning.
Right. So for 8 years, I was doing In the Loop in the mornings from 8 to 10 a.m. So I was getting up every day for 8 years at 3:45 a.m. And don't get me wrong, I loved it. I am a morning person. After having 2 kids, you have to be a morning person. So I did that for 8 years, where we covered the markets, we talked to all the big newsmakers, and we were doing it during the financial crisis as well. So that was definitely an exciting time. And then just recently, I moved over to the afternoons, and I'm doing the lunchtime report now, the lunchtime program, which means I finally have a life. I actually have a social life now. And so I'm liking it.
Yeah. So the book, I liked the book.
Thank
I read
you.
it.
By the way, I'm so impressed. Brian is like one of the few people who's interviewed me who actually has like read the book.
I have read the book. Work smart.
Work smart.
Yes, work smart. Explain to me why you wrote the book. What was the thesis?
Okay, so several years ago, I mean, I've always been interested in people's careers. I've always been interested in what makes people, how do they rise to the very top? How do people become billionaires and millionaires and billionaires, and how do they build companies? But several years ago, or throughout my career, but as I got more advanced in my career, people would be asking me questions like, how do you network? How do you find mentors? And they would just be, younger people just asking me advice. And I remember for myself, I was asking those same kinds of questions to the people who would come on our show, various CEOs, people way more successful than me. I had all these questions about, how did they get to where they are, and how did they navigate how do they navigate their own issues, and how do they get over the fear of taking risks and things like that. So I thought to myself, if I have these questions and people are asking me these questions, then there's something there. There's something to be talked about. And so that's kind of how I came together with this book, where I decided to interview the top 20 or so CEOs that I knew and who came on my program often, and get their advice and put it all into this.
So a lot of finance CEOs, Jamie Dimon,
yes,
and others. It was interesting, I thought, that you wrote the book after the financial crisis, because I thought at the financial crisis, sort of it pulled the curtain back, and it was like, wait, they don't even know what's going on at their own companies, so maybe they're not as great as we thought.
Right. Well, definitely I think the financial crisis was a good equalizer, in many ways, because it did show, as you say, Brian, Warren Buffett, for instance, he has this saying that when the tide goes back, you know who's naked. So you saw,
or who's wearing a bathing suit,
or who's not, who is and who isn't, right?
Yes.
So
when you're in the water, it looks like everyone's wearing a bathing suit.
Right. So I think the financial crisis, what it did expose are the people who were swimming naked, right? Which is the Stan O'Neills of the world, and the Chuck Princes, and the Dick Folds, and it did in fact then push those people out, because they were in fact people who didn't know what was going on at their company. Before that, remember, right before the financial crisis, it was rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
Everybody was doing well. It's a lot harder to figure out what exactly is going on and who's doing well and who isn't. Not unlike, by the way, a little bit of the situation that's going on right now in our own markets and our own economy. I know it doesn't feel that great, but the markets have gone up over the last 8 years, almost a straight up situation. So, I hope we don't get into that situation again, but I think what you saw in 2008 was that we were rising so well that nobody could tell right away, who was really leading a substantial company and who wasn't.
So out of the CEOs, it seems like Jamie Dimon came out the best of all of the Wall Street people. And you've spent, I guess, a lot of your book, you go back to Jamie Dimon. What about him do you think makes him a very good leader?
It's not just me, by the way, Brian. I would ask other CEOs about who they admire, and his name would come up quite often. I always find it interesting with people like that. So there's a few people in this universe who stand out, right? So there's Jamie Dimon, there's Warren Buffett, there's Elon Musk, and maybe a few others, but that's about it. And I think part of that has to do with, when I was watching who was able to watch the debates last night? Anybody, or were you all partying? Okay.
All right.
So.
Some civic-minded people over there.
Right.
The rest of you.
You care about your country. That's good. Okay. So you look at the debate, right? And everybody on that stage last night, they're all successful people. I mean, some of them, like Rand Paul, hardly got a word in edgewise, right? And others, like Donald Trump, were center stage. But what I mean by that, regardless of their politics, they've all hit a certain level. So when you're a CEO of a company, you've already hit a certain level, whether you're a CEO of a $100 million company or you're the CEO of a $100 billion company. So getting back to your question about Jamie Dimon, Jamie Dimon is kind of like the Michael Jordan now of, or the LeBron James of CEOs. He's the guy that everybody else wants to be. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that he did navigate the bank very well during the financial crisis. I mean, he's always said, that they didn't need to have bailout money, but they did take the bailout money because they were forced to, and there's lots of debate about that. But but they have come out of that crisis, a stronger bank. Now, not to say that they haven't had their own issues. We have the London whale trading scandal. We have the settlement with the Justice Department.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, none of that is to excuse the company itself. But I'm saying, as a leader, I think that people have given him a lot of credit for being able to navigate that since the financial crisis.
But so what stood out to you as far as what makes him a good leader?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, I think all good leaders are good decision makers. So, I've asked several CEOs about this. They're all very good at making decisions, and Jamie Dimon is one of them. They may not always be the right decisions, but they make the decisions quickly and they make them firmly and they follow through on them. The other thing about Jamie is that he really does. He said to me, I wear this jersey and I bleed this blood for J.P. Morgan. So even though he didn't start the company is one with him. He feels like he really it is that he wears the jersey and he wears it well. So in that sense, he's very passionate about the bank. He's dedicated to it. It's not just a job for him, but it is his life.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's hard for regular people to relate to bank CEOs? I mean, because they're not really creating anything; they're just moving money around. I mean, so Elon Musk he's going to take us to Mars. Jamie Dimon is making a lot of money for.
I thought Elon Musk was going to nuke Mars, right? Wasn't that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah. I think he plans on dying on Mars.
I think so too.
And he might.
No, he's one of the most innovative CEOs out there, right?
Yeah.
He, by the way, has a lot of haters as well on the other side. A lot of people are shorting his stock. But I think, look, I don't want to be on this stage defending Wall Street CEOs or empathizing with them. It's really more about who displays the leadership, right? So Jamie Dimon among banks, is considered. Lloyd Blankfein as well is considered, the top lead. Elon Musk right now is one of the hottest CEOs out there in technology and in the auto space. You have, Howard Schultz at Starbucks and others. So I think within each sector, there's certain CEOs that rise to the top.
Yeah. So what stood out to you for Elon Musk?
Well, Elon, the interesting thing about Elon is what he taught me in our conversation was the whole idea of fear. So, I went into the conversation with him. So I've been interviewing Elon for several years. We talked a lot about Tesla, and I said to Elon and his people, I said, I'm writing this book. I'd like to just talk to you about how you became successful. And he was like, sure, okay. So walked in and we had lunch, and one of the things he said, one of the things I asked him is that you seem to be so fearless, like. If you want to go build a rocket company, you go and build a rocket company. You want to build a car company, you go and build a car company. You want to do this, you do whatever. And he said, look, actually, I have a lot of fear. He's like, actually, he's like, I live with fear every day. Mm-hmm. And I said, how do you live with, you seem so fearless. And for him, he was telling me the story about how when Tesla, I don't know if you remember, but this was what, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, was near bankruptcy. He was sleeping on people's couches. He was getting a divorce. I think the divorce was on like the front page of the Wall Street Journal. All sorts of terrible things were happening to him at the time, and the thought crossed his mind: should I just fold it up? And he said, I absolutely, at that moment, at one of the worst moments in my life, I couldn't, because the fear that I had of of continuing at Tesla was smaller than the fear that I have that if I didn't do it, I would regret it for the rest of my life. So what I thought was really interesting about Elon was just that, for him and for I think a lot of really successful people, it's like the fear of not doing something, the fear of not going after it is always bigger than the fear of, of going bankrupt, or the fear of losing your money or losing your job.
So do you think those lessons are applicable to normal people? Because
Yeah.
a lot of these people are extremely abnormal. Like Steve Jobs, everyone goes back to. He sounded like a miserable person. Elon Musk is really weird. So are these?
Well, you know what? I think we're all a little weird. I don't know.
Are these like?
I'm a little weird. We're all weird.
But not. I don't think we only just met, but not in the
never gonna be
Elon
a
Musk
billionaire,
way.
so, okay.
Not in the Elon Musk way. Very bizarre man. How applicable are these to people building their own careers?
I think, look, I actually mean it when I think we're all a little quirky. I always think that we all have, interesting traits about ourselves, and you see that sometimes expressed even more in some of these really larger than life personalities. But, there isn't any like one single secret trait that all of these people have, that you will never have, it's more that, it's a combination of, they all work really hard. They're very passionate about what they do. There's some things that are a little bit different. Like I said, they're good decision makers. They have a little less fear than maybe, the rest of us do. And so that's something that all of us can address. But they do have a little bit less fear. They're all great networkers. They're all great at looking at the bigger picture. I think what makes a successful entrepreneur or successful CEO is that you kind of have to be, you're almost like a photographer, I guess, where you're always looking at the details, like you focus very micro, but then at the same time you also have to take the big aerial shots and look at, so you're like looking at the trees, but you're also looking at the forest. And I think like really good entrepreneurs and really good CEOs are able to do that very seamlessly. They can be tackling a very minute detail, and then at the same time, the next moment they can look at something, from 30,000 feet.
So your book talks a lot about also just career advice. So
Yes.
Walk us through the sort of main bits that you picked up as far as building a career.
Okay, well, you and I talked about this before. Sleep. Not a lot of them sleep. So they're all
I disagree with this one.
I know. They're all very hard workers. Some of them don't sleep very much. I know.
Like 5 hours a night.
5 hours a night. Who here sleeps? I'm just curious because who sleeps 5 hours a night here in this room?
By choice.
Okay. What about 6 hours? Okay. Everyone's sleeping like 7, 8 hours? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wonder.
Thank you. Good. Good for you. In order to cognitively, I thought like we left behind this, sleeping is for losers thing in the 1980s.
No, but it's not sleeping for losers. It's not sleeping for losers.
Sleep when you die, that
By
kind of
the way,
thing.
Warren Buffett sleeps like 9 hours a night, okay?
I'm with him.
He's also 80-something, but anyway.
That's fine. I'm just getting there early.
Okay, so not a lot of sleep. You were asking me what other career advice that people had given me. I think that you can't fake the passion. You can't fake being passionate about what you do. So if you're not passionate about what you do, you're just not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to do it the best. So you can't fake that passion. And I think the fear factor that I talked about earlier was a very big lesson for me, and I apply that in my own life now. It's just this idea that when you do feel that fear, it's always well, give me the 5-year rule. In 5 years, will I be, will I regret this?
Well, you talked about that in your own career, in moving. I mean, you were in print journalism, and then you made the move into TV. Talk about that.
Well, okay, so it's such a different life. So this was 10 years ago when I was in print. I was at the Financial Times, and I remember at that moment, I was, I'd been looking to do something different. I knew that looking ahead in 5 years, that I want to be at the position that I was at now, that I want to still be writing and reporting in print. And I said, no. I said, I want to be doing something different. And TV was something that I had been experimenting with. So I started to look for a job and look for a career switch then. At that time, and this was only 10 years ago, trying to switch from print to TV was actually it was as if I was looking to go from being a journalist to being a doctor. I mean, it was just unheard of, that people were like, you'll not be able to do this. It's a whole different skill set, that sort of thing. So I got a lot of resistance from people. Nowadays, I mean, we're multi-platform, right? We can do video, we can do print, we can do online, and we can be everything in one package. So it was during that time that I remember I had. This is a story about, I talked to a career coach at the time. This woman who was recommended to me as someone who could teach me how to present on TV. I was a print reporter. I didn't know how to present. So I remember going to her offices. It was in New York. And, we started our lesson. She got out some newspapers, and she said, okay, I want you to read these articles and read them to me the way you would as if you were presenting on TV. And I started to read them. And she kept saying to me, more energy, more natural, read them with passion. And I started to get frustrated, because I was like, the more she was telling me more energy, the more I was shouting and yelling. And so at some point I was like, you know what, I can't do this. And she got out a whiteboard, and she said, look, I know you're frustrated, you want to do this. Let me just write one formula for you and just think about it. So she said, opportunity plus preparation equals luck. So, when she wrote that equation out, she was like, Betty, just look at that really carefully. Opportunity plus preparation equals luck. So what she was really trying to tell me, I was thinking I could just easily go into TV, that somehow some stroke of luck or opportunity would come my way and I would be able to make the switch. What she was trying to tell me is that if you don't prepare, when that opportunity comes, you won't be able to nab it, and that will be the luck that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. So it was from that moment on that I realized that I really needed to prepare. And so we finished the lesson. I did more. It was like another year of preparation, and lo and behold, I got an opportunity to go to Asia with CNBC Asia, and then years later, people would say, you were so lucky. That was such a lucky break. And it wasn't a lucky break. It was just years of preparation. Yeah.
So you also write in the book about mentorship. Are you a believer in formal mentor programs?
I think formal mentoring programs work for some people. I think particularly people who are not used to finding their mentors or not used to networking. I know this audience is really good at networking. So I think it works for younger people, perhaps, who don't have that access right away. I think as you grow older and more advanced in your career, finding a network or finding a mentor becomes much more organic, and it's less about going into a mentoring program and more about who is in your network who eventually will become a mentor.
Yeah, you write about networking a lot. Explain to me your sort of theory of networking. What makes a good networker?
Well, I think networking is. I think a lot of us go into, and I do this too, go into relationships or go into situations where you may be at this summit or you may be at some other conference or in your circle, and a lot of us think about what can we get out of it, right? Like what's going to help us. So so I always ask this question to people, who's the most important person to you? Who's the most important person out there? Anybody know? My wife. Oh, that's so sweet.
Smart answer.
That is smart. So the most important person is yourself. Okay? Yes. Right.
That's not going to go over well.
So it is yourself because, look, we are all involved in ourselves. You know, the only person we care about, I hate to say this, everyone, look, we love our kids, we love our spouses, but it is ourselves. And so we go into a lot of situations thinking about ourselves. So I think in order to make a networking relationship work, you think a lot about what you can give the other person. I mean, that, by the way, is one of the easiest ways to be liked, is to think about other people and what you can give to them. It's also a very easy way when you're dating, is to listen to the other person all the time and not talk about yourself. So when you think about other people, it makes you it gives you an instant connection.
But what if someone's not a natural networker?
So I always say,
what if they don't like people?
Well, I can't help you there if you don't like people.
Okay.
But one of the easiest ways to get someone to like you, and one of the things that people don't do very much, is people don't shut up. So shut up and listen.
Okay.
So listening is probably one of the most underrated traits out there. If you ever want to do, and look, I come up from a background where I'm not selling something, so I'm not in sales, but I've been told by people who are very successful salespeople that going in and making a deal is not about telling that person or that client what is so great about yourself and what you can give them, but it's more about listening to what they want and then being able to deliver for them what they want. Because if you listen to people enough, eventually they will tell you what they want. Mm-hmm. So that probably is one of the best ways to connect to people, whether it's in business or in personal. That's what I just mentioned about dating. You know, whether in business or personal relationships, is to actually just be quiet sometimes and just listen to what the person is saying. And that's something that I need to do in my job a lot. When you interview people on stage or on air, one of the most important things that I need to always think about is I need to quiet myself and just listen to their answers, because some of the most important things will reveal themselves in their answers.
Yeah. And it's funny, that actually came up in the town hall. I don't know if you were in it at that point, but
in the town hall that
yes.
just happened?
Yeah.
I was a part of it, yeah.
Yeah, the listening part. So tell us about being on live TV, and in watching it, I think a lot of people don't understand all the things that are going on sort of behind the scenes. I know, having done live TV a lot, it's kind of nerve-wracking. So you got people talking in your ear and stuff.
You do. There's a part in the book where I talk about what it's like to try to listen while you've got producers and directors in your ear. I think for me, what was most enlightening when I first got on TV, and I started to be, I was at CNBC Asia, I started in Hong Kong, was that the more you are yourself on TV, the more you can connect to your audience. I always thought, like, you have to be an anchor, like, wear the shoulder pads and the suit, and you would talk in an anchor style, and you don't. I think the most successful people who are on air, whether they're anchors or they're TV hosts or whatever else, is that they're just themselves, only maybe a little bit more, a little bit more flashy.
So Wolf Blitzer is really like that? It's amazing.
They're all very much like themselves, and so I think that's probably one of the biggest things I learned when I first went on TV. And then the other thing is just no matter what you're saying, no matter how intelligent you think your question is, and no matter how great your show is, people will always have an opinion about your clothes, your hair, or your shoes.
Really? What do you think about my shoes?
Love them.
Great. We have any questions? We have a couple minutes left for Betty about work smarts.
Questions?
Bloomberg? Yep.
Could you share with us who some of your role models are in terms of anchors or colleagues in the space, besides Ron Burgundy, of course?
Why? What's wrong with him? There's so many. I mean, I grew up, watching Peter Jennings, Barbara Walters, Diane Sawyer, and I'm, amazed, for instance, at the long careers of of Diane Sawyer and of Barbara Walters and Mike Wallace even. I was just watching an interview recently that he did, with the former Chinese president and how, what kind of an interviewer he was, and just how strong of an interviewer he was. So those were some of the people that I really admired growing up. In terms of business leaders, like I said, some of the ones that are in the book are people that I just admire as being very good decision makers and just knowing what they want and being very firm in their convictions. So those are some of the people that I really take too.
Anyone you were really unimpressed with that you've interviewed? Like who you're like, I don't know how that person got there.
You want me to name names of people?
Ideally, yeah.
Unimpressed. I mean, there's not a particular person, but I'm always disappointed if, I read about someone and they have such an amazing background. They sound like amazing people on paper. They've done so many crazy things, and they come on air, and they're just boring. Boring to listen to, boring to talk to, very low energy. I'm always disappointed when that happens. Mm-hmm. And it happens sometimes, I think some people you just never know, I guess is what I'm saying.
That's
you just
true.
never know.
Yep. I think we have a question over here, didn't we? Yeah.
The man who loves his wife.
And header tags.
When you were talking about working with a trainer / coach, and so when you were getting into broadcasting, is this something that you were like naturally inclined to speak in front of people when you were a child, so you found yourself in that line? Or did you think that you wanted to be there and then you developed skills or had to work at skills to be so good at it? I don't know if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. No, I mean, I actually was very, I was your typical Asian American kid, straight A's. I thought I was going to be a doctor. My dad wanted me to be a doctor. I was very shy. There were some parts of me looking back that I'm like, oh yeah, I was kind of like sometimes, loud and obnoxious, like when I was little. But so I didn't grow up wanting, I didn't grow up wanting to be on stage or wanting to be on air. Like that wasn't my life's goal when I was younger. But I always knew that I loved talking to people. I always knew that I loved meeting different people. That was one of the great things about the job that I had at the Financial Times, was I got to travel around the South and meet people who were very different from me and listen to their stories. So I always knew that that's what I loved hearing. And even today, I mean, I love talking about other people more than I love talking about myself. So I always love hearing other people's stories. And I think that's the single biggest thing that's driven me through my career in newspapers and now into TV.
Cool. Betty, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.